Hi, this is Peter Woolfolk speaking. Now, first of all, thank you so very much for listening to the podcast. Now, I am very excited to let you know that the podcast is now available on Amazon Alexa. You know the drill. Simply say, Alexa, play Public Relations Review Podcast, and she'll take it from there. And again, thank you for listening. And if you enjoy the program, please become a subscriber. Now, on to the podcast.
Welcome. This is the Public Relations Review Podcast, a program to discuss the many facets of public relations with seasoned professionals, educators, authors, and others. Now, here is your host, Peter Woolfolk.
Welcome to the Public Relations Review Podcast and to our listeners all across America and around the world. Now, Apple has ranked this podcast among the top 1% of podcasts worldwide. And recently, FeedSpot listed this podcast as number 13 on its top 70 best public relations podcasts in the United States. So thank you to all of our guests and listeners for your continued support. And if you enjoy the podcast, please leave a review. Now, a question to my audience. Is your firm looking to hire top public relations talent? Are you a public relations professional looking to move higher? If so, what are firms looking for in talent and PR professionals? And how do you successfully prepare yourself to be a top-level PR candidate? Well, my guest today has answers for you. Her public relations recruitment firm is small by design, and their entire team has extensive experience in the communications industry. Each candidate search is unique, and their team has 2 decades of expertise in providing top talent to every client. They have a unique vantage point to evaluate communications talent, having either 1, done the work themselves, or 2, their close collaboration with individuals in the roles they are hired to fill. Now, with over 25 years of experience in communications and executive recruiting, my guest is a seasoned professional in this industry. She began her career in public affairs in Washington, D.C. before relocating to San Francisco. Later, she spent 6 years at top PR firms Catchem and Byte Communications. She began recruiting in 2005 and later founded Casey Partners in 2009. She has been placing top communications talent for over 18 years. So I welcome Brooke Kruger, founder and CEO of Casey Partners, and she joins me today from San Francisco, California. Brooke, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Well, look, let's first ask, what made you? You've been in public relations for a long time, so how did you decide that you would start a PR placement firm?
That's a great question. So I began my career out of college in D.C. I worked on campaigns and in public affairs. And I moved to San Francisco and joined a PR agency, Catchem and then Byte. And there were certain aspects of PR that I loved, client services, new business, getting results. But I always felt like there was something missing. And I would look in my background and what I would layer up to. And I would look at my boss's jobs and think, this is not for me. But I still wanted to be a part of the industry and use my skill set well. And so I kind of fell into recruiting in 2005 and really found my calling of placing PR candidates within companies. And I started my own business in 2009, which is Casey Partners, and we focus exclusively on communication search. We place PR and communications candidates with agencies, corporations, startups, and VC firms.
Well, let me say this. I'm from Washington, D.C., and I worked on Capitol Hill. So when you say public affairs in Washington, that means working for the government. So, if you work, particularly if you work on Capitol Hill, and I worked on Congress, I mean, you work hard, you learn a lot, and you don't have time to make mistakes. Or if you do make them, you overcome them very quickly. And you just learn so much more in a very, very short period of time. So I certainly salute you as having had Washington, D.C. as a training ground for public relations.
Absolutely.
So now, how have you go about identifying clients, and how do they find you? How do you go about identify? How have clients found you to say, look, here's some of the people we'd like to get onto our staff?
So I've been doing the same thing for 20 years, which is finding communications candidates and placing them within companies and really finding a perfect match for people. Because I worked in the industry before and I know the jobs that I'm hiring for, having worked in them or worked with their bosses or people managed me, I have a pretty strong network. And so, I would say, my network is actually everything. So a lot of my business comes to me from repeat customers and through referrals. So companies come to me, and given my industry expertise and having been doing this for so long, they know that I can quickly find them the right candidate for their roles. I'm also really able to evaluate, what my clients are looking for, and then really connect with candidates to make sure this is the type of job they want to do and they're doing the work that truly motivates them.
Well, let's talk about the range of jobs that you try to fill. I mean, what are the ranges there? Are they starting positions for someone maybe right out of college? Or do you have senior openings where, let's say if we're in Washington, you might be the media public affairs officer for maybe one of these Senate committees or House committees up there. What ranges of jobs do you fill, and do you have a request for?
Another good question. Well, I've filled all levels of comms positions. My focus is really the senior position. Mm-hmm. So the head of comms, the CCO, the VP of comms, someone who's leading the communications function or a function within the communications org, whether it's a director of corporate communications, a director of employee comms, product communications. And then we also do fill the positions that support those roles. Most of our positions land between 15 plus years experience, but we also fill, positions with 5+ years of experience as they would be supporting those senior comms leaders.
Now, when the search begins, at some point you've gotten your marching order, so to speak, as here's the person we want you to sign the contract or whatever. From that point until the time you show or somebody is hired that you presented there, how much time goes between the starting point and the ending point, if you will?
At Casey Partners, we like to quickly find our clients the right candidate. And so when we start a search, we usually send candidates within 1 to 3 days. And we are able to do that having worked on so many different searches and having such a strong network that we can quickly understand what's going to be the right fit. Now, once we have candidates in play, it can usually take between 6 to 8 weeks to close the job. There are certain market conditions and things that make a search take longer, but we like to fill jobs between.
So how have you been able to identify candidates that you might want to present? How do you create your pool of candidates that you have in waiting, so to speak?
At Casey Partners, we're constantly talking to candidates and trying to understand what motivates them, what they're looking for, what kind of work is going to bring them joy. How many people they manage, what kind of organization do they thrive in, what size company. So we're constantly talking to new candidates and really trying to understand, what makes them tick. So then when we get a search, we always have initial candidates in mind, and we have similar searches that we worked on. So I never, ever feel like when I get a search, I'm starting from ground zero. There's always other searches I can recall and candidates I've worked with in the past to begin a search from.
Mm-hmm. Now, you're located in San Francisco. How about the clients you serve? Are they around San Francisco and beyond? What's the geographic location there? How is that set up?
So I've been based in the San Francisco Bay Area for 20 plus years, and we do a lot of searches within tech. So many of our searches are local to the Bay Area, but we work across the country. We also have a lot of searches in New York and LA as well, and other markets. Obviously, during the pandemic, remote was very, very popular, and candidates were being placed all over. I will say in the last 1 to 2 years, the return to office is real. Almost all of our new searches, I would say 95% of them, require 3 to 4 days in the office right now. Mm-hmm. Remote is now there still are remote searches, but it is not the norm right now. Most searches do require return to office, but that could be in the San Francisco Bay Area, New York, LA, Chicago, other markets as well.
You mentioned the return to office. What is the major reason that you are seeing that companies are asking people to spend most of their time in the office compared to working remotely?
I think that before the pandemic, most employees were in the office 5 days a week. I think working from home 1 day a week was a rarity. And the pandemic changed everything, and everyone was working from home. And it works for some companies. I work from home every day, so I get it. But other companies are realizing that in-person time is valuable for collaboration and training. And, with junior candidates, I was talking to someone last night at a communications event in San Francisco about how just critical it is for the junior people to be in the office and be learning from others and learning by osmosis and hearing how people are doing calls and reacting. And so I don't think companies need to go back to 5 days a week. I'm not saying that at all, but I think most companies feel a few days in the office is going to be valuable for their team.
Let me ask you now, how are you helping potential candidates? What are you seeing from your viewpoint? What are some of the shortcomings of some of the candidates you might be looking at, and where do they need to improve? What are some of the major areas you think that perhaps some candidates need to improve in before they could make a solid presentation for a new job?
So we are in a very, very tight job market for the communications industry. From fall 2020 to May 2022, the communications industry boomed. Every company was hiring, they were growing huge teams, and there was a lot of opportunity out there. And then in maybe the summer of 2022, especially in the tech industry, layoffs started. They just didn't stop. Teams were cut. People were told to do more with less, and there were not as many positions available to be hired for, and then people weren't leaving their jobs if they weren't laid off. So there was just inflection point in the industry where nothing was really moving. And so what happened was more and more people lost their jobs, and there was a bigger candidate pool competing for a smaller amount of jobs. So what I have seen, I saw stops and starts in 2023, and then in 2024, it's really been consistent since I would say fall 2024. And so there still are more jobs out there. Again, the challenge is there's a lot of people looking for jobs. So it's a very competitive market. And so what candidates need to do is really prepare for the interviews. And I know everybody will say they prepare for an interview, but I always want to advise candidates, if you're interviewing for a company, you obviously need to, everyone knows, go put your best foot forward, go in there, understand, why you are interested in the job, what qualifies you for the job. Something is simple. A lot of people read a job spec, apply for a job, and then they probably don't ever look at the job spec again. You really need to be looking at the job spec and matching your experience and have examples of everything they're asking for. Mm-hmm. And I'm finding the people who are getting the jobs today are usually in a final round with 2 to 3 really highly qualified candidates. Sometimes industry expertise is winning out. Sometimes it's something you can't control. But what candidates need to do is always put their best foot forward. Be available, be flexible, be responsive, and just really, everybody does want a job in this market, and they are everyone's trying to do their best that they can. And, there's obviously other factors when you're interviewing and, people are in jobs. But I've seen people lose out on jobs for minor mistakes that could have been prevented.
Now, when you say a minor mistake, give some examples of what were considered minor mistakes.
I knew you were going to say that. So I think employers want to see genuine interest and enthusiasm on why you want the job. And that can be shown through interview prep. So a minor mistake would be, or let's not say minor, just a mistake would be not fully preparing for the job. Mm-hmm. So it's, and now a trend in job processes, there's 4 or 5 rounds of interviews. After each interview, you need to reflect, what were they asking you? Was there anything that I didn't address? Is there anything I could have said better? Is there anything that I wasn't able to give a good example? Feel free to follow up and give an example of that, or take that information into the next interview. Mm-hmm. I truly believe in a thank you note. A thank you note does not need to be a novel, but if you meet with someone for an interview, send them a follow-up and thank them for their time. That is, again, another way to show interest. If you are working with a recruiter, follow up after each interview. I always say this, but don't make people track you down. My clients will come to me and be like, okay, we have these 4 people. How's everyone feeling about it? And if I have a candidate who's not even responding to me, I don't know how they're feeling about it. So it's a lot of process and thought, but you want to truly show interest and enthusiasm in the position. The other thing I think about that's happening right now is references are really important, and you need to prep your references. And that means telling your references why you're interested in the job and why you think they'll be a good fit. I had a couple positions in the last year or so where references decided on the offer. And it wasn't that the person got a bad reference, just the reference wasn't fully aware why they even wanted the job. And that didn't read very well.
Mm-hmm. Well, I have been in public relations a very, very long time. And one of the things that really helped me was learning as much as I can about public relations and things associated with it. I'll give you an example. I was encouraged at one time to consider doing some radio work simply because of my voice. And, it never came to my attention about it. So I decided, well, what the hell, let's give it a go. What I learned more so was not only being able to handle a radio station, but also how to produce on radio, how to edit in radio, and those kinds of things.
I like that.
That led to another thing. As a matter of fact, it was I also ran across an opportunity in one of my jobs to learn how to uplink and downlink satellite programs. So, I've got all these kinds of qualifications. And television, I believe it or not, I went to the guy who, first meeting I ever had like this was the guy who founded, I didn't know much about it at the time because it was so long ago, who founded Black Entertainment Television. Well, he was we spoke at an event. I said, well, let me come and talk to you. I'm talking to him about marketing things. He said, well, that's good for you, but what I'm looking for is somebody to produce the show. So I said, so can I get back to you?
I mean, I think you make a really good point because we're talking a lot about getting jobs, but another thread is like how to keep a job in this market.
Mm-hmm.
We are in a new era. It's been described as this big boss era where there's not huge culture and people are, there's high demands. And so I always say, like, figure out how to do your job and the jobs around you. Be available, be flexible, be adaptable. Sounds like that's what you were doing. I was just saying they were asking you to do one job and they said, what about producing? And you figured out how to make that work.
I'm really very happy to hear you say that because that's the thing of it. I learned as much as I could about as many things as I could. Because one of the things that, having learned how to produce a TV show and downlink a satellite and all those kind of things in radio, that when I got on Capitol Hill, I was problem solving. One congresswoman, her normal would set up with a radio station in Texas, I think, let's say 9 o'clock every Monday, for instance, whatever it was. But anyway, when you have a committee meeting, you've got to go. So I called the producer ahead of time. I said, look, can we just record the show the way we normally would, maybe Sunday or whenever else, or Friday afternoon, and then you have it Monday. And I said, fine, that's great. We'll do it that way. I had another member of Congress who was down in Brazil, and I had called for some sort of a climate control, whatever it happened to be. So I called, he was from New York, so I called the 3 big news stations in New York and asked them, would you be interested in talking to the congressman directly from Brazil? They said, oh, absolutely. And I said, oh, by the way, we'll pay the bill. And all of them said, absolutely. So I got him through on 3 major radio stations, and how we did that, doing those kinds of things. When I was in the administration, I was at the Department of Education, and the assistant secretary was due to make a presentation somewhere out in Wisconsin. Well, the snowstorm prevented flying, so I knew of a satellite set up at the Labor Department 2 blocks away, made that happen. So we trudged through the snow, sat her down, and boom, got it done. So it's about solving problems for people as well. Doing a job is but it's problem solving.
Absolutely. And I think people always ask, like, what are the number, 1 skills that communicators need today? And I think number 1 is being a good storyteller, but number 2 is being a problem solver. You have to be able to think 2 steps ahead.
Mm-hmm.
And when your clients and executives and stakeholders are asking you for something, what are they asking for you for? Why? And then what could happen? You just always want to be scenario planning in your head. And the world moves so fast right now. You really do need to think 2 steps ahead.
Well, the other thing that came out of this is that I started in the Clinton campaign as handling communications for him as a campaign communications man in the state of Delaware. Well, now I'm dealing with the governor, I'm dealing with lieutenant governors and mayors and so forth and so on. So these people want things done. How can we do this and how can we handle things? And then when the vice president and first lady came up, there's details. Working with the Secret Service and the communications team, they want to know every detail, all sorts of things. So being prepared, Secret Service want to know what door you're coming in, who's sitting where.
Yep.
All that sort of stuff. So you get comfortable now getting as many details as you can to answer all sort of problems. The other thing I found out is when you're putting together a project, make sure any and everybody associated with that project is at the table at the same time. Because I've seen the wheels come off. Okay, we'll find here. All right, you hand that to Joe and tell him this is his part. Well,
no, for sure. Well, it's interesting you say that about the your Clinton campaign work, because I started my career working on a presidential campaign as well for Senator Dole. So we were probably on opposite sides at the time.
Mm-hmm.
I was an intern in '96. And it's like I look back, that campaign experience is so critical. You're right, in problem solving, in details, in being prepared. And it's obviously a different era now, but I'm grateful for that experience and all that I learned on the Dole campaign.
Well, and we were, because, I mean, that's exactly what I said. You've got to solve problems, because as a matter of fact, I think we were in a radio station. I was in there with the lieutenant governor, and they were talking about something. I forget what the details were, but I had to go look that up right quick so I could slip her the answer on a sheet of paper.
Well, and then do you even remember how we had to look stuff up?
All right.
On the '96 campaign, we didn't have emails. We we couldn't find our news online. I remember somebody's job was to go to the newspaper stands in the morning, at like 4 in the morning, and get all the papers and cut the clip. So,
here's what's interesting about this is that I believe personally, and as I listen to you, that having worked in a presidential campaign is one of the best experiences that I had in preparing me for communications work. There's no question about it. Detailed, dealing with senior officials, getting it done, getting it done right. Don't be bashful about asking people for help, whatever that happens to be. So I wound up actually doing one of my podcast episodes on that. So I reached out to people from different campaigns, and I had, what did I have? It was one lady who worked for Newt Gingrich when he ran president, and a fellow down in Texas, I forget, Ross Perot, I think it was. So we had them all on there talking about the experiences we had, how do we get over hurdles, how do you solve these problems, all these other kinds of things, working with the local police when they travel, working with the Secret Service, and all of those kinds of things. And that wound up being one of the very highest rated episodes that I've had in the 6 years I've been doing this.
I'm going to listen to that. I'm going to listen to that. I mean, I was still in college when I'm from Kansas City, and my aunt lived in D.C., and she had suggested I apply to work for Senator Dole and in the majority leader's office, and I ended up going to work on the campaign, and I just loved it. But if I think back on my operating model and how I think, like, that was such a formative experience, and I'm so grateful that I got to do that, especially at such a young age. We had to work with such a great man, Senator Dole, who, no matter what side of the aisle you're on, he is just a class act.
Well, and let me say this, back then I can say that when I worked for the chairman of the House Education and Labor Committee, one of his closest friends was a Republican guy who was on the committee as well. And they traveled together because, members of Congress, they go around the country.
Very different. It's a very different climate now, and we don't want to talk politics now.
Right.
But it's a very different than it was very different. That's all I'll say.
Well,
but
yeah.
I'm grateful for my experience and what I learned on the campaign, and I can't wait to go back and listen to that episode.
Well, and that's exactly what I tell people. Having worked in a political campaign, you will learn a lot more in that campaign for whatever number of months you do, perhaps than you might get in graduate school, because it is so intense. You're working with so many different people. I'm working with the governor, lieutenant, all those kind of folks, and you got to learn details because the Secret Service has a lot of questions to ask. They want a lot of information. So you bring that proclivity for having details that you bring into whatever job you have so you can ask as many questions as you need to make sure the job is run right, everybody is on the same page, all those other kinds of things. So the political experience is hugely important. It was in mine, as obviously in your growth and development.
Yes. Absolutely.
Well, let me ask you, Brooke, have we missed anything? Because, I've listened to that you do a lot of things for a lot of people, both for those looking to be hired and the companies looking to hire. Is there anything we may have missed in our discussion?
Nothing's coming to mind. I feel like myself and my company, KC Partners, we are small by design, as you mentioned, and the recruiters that work at Casey Partners, they've all worked in the communications industry like myself. So I think we are able to quickly assess what our clients want, again, but also understand what candidates want too. And I think in a down market, it's just as important to figure out what you want and you want to do in this market and what you're good at doing, because you really want to find the right match. And, my greatest joy is when I place someone in a job and they're happy and it's a good match and the client's happy and the candidate's happy. Like, nothing feels better than that. And I think it's so important for people to kind of take a step back and understand what is the work that they enjoy, what gives them, what motivates them. And if I look at myself, like, I love getting results and working with candidates and working with clients. Like, that's what in the workforce makes me tick and thrive. And so I feel like I'm so lucky that I truly found my calling and I get to run a business doing what I love every day.
I think that's very, very important. The other thing that I think that we probably touched on a little bit was learning as much as you can about the organizations you're going to work for and whatever the job is or project is, to learn as much as you can from as many people as you can, because somewhere along the line that information is going to come in handy.
It truly does. And just when I take on a new search, I really try to go deep with my client and understand the organization, the culture, what kind of person is actually going to be successful there. Because not all people are going to be successful at every company, and that is okay. You may find that you can't work at a small startup or a big company is too much for you. I found that. I worked at a PR agency and it wasn't for me. And so I really do want to try to help people find the right fit for them, and in immersing in that company and understanding what makes the company tick is also important.
Well, I think, you probably answered my last question. That was that if you wanted to say anything to any potential candidates, and I think you may be able to hit that nail right on the head already.
Oh, yes, for sure. Yeah. I mean, it is a tough market. It is a tricky market. But what I would tell candidates, it is getting better. If you look on LinkedIn every Monday, more and more people are getting jobs. More and more people are leaving jobs, which means that, jobs are going to be open and companies are adding headcount. The market, the communications hiring market is getting better. So, but it is still critical to put your best foot forward.
Well, not only that, I mean, keep learning as much as you can, because it's also moving very fast, particularly with artificial intelligence and all the other platforms that are out there, that you need to get a handle on that, even if it's just a basic handle, to understand how it can work and the benefits that it brings to your particular job and the shortcomings that it might have as well.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we didn't even touch on AI, but understanding AI is critical, and understanding how you use the tools that are going to help you improve your job is critical. And there are certain things that AI won't replace. And I think human connection and really kind of trying to understand what motivates people and makes people tick. But there are AI tools that will help people improve their job as well. Yeah,
and I think people need to understand that, AI is there to help you. So you need to get your hands around how it works and how you can use it in your particular. Absolutely. I use it quite a bit in the production of this podcast. I mean,
that's great.
It's me talking, but it's going to do the transcript for this once I'm done. Those kinds of things. It saves time, so forth and so on. So I would always say to any person, learn as much as you can about any job you're going to go into. It really, really does help. Absolutely, absolutely. Well, it was so great to chat with you. Well, Brooke, let me say thank you so very, very much. And let me just say to my guest that you've been listening to Brooke Kruger. She is the founder and CEO of KC Partners out of San Francisco, California. And I want to suggest that you share this information with some of your colleagues about this particular episode, and also listen to the next edition of the Public Relations Review. And perhaps we sure would appreciate a review from you. So don't forget to listen to the next edition of the Public Relations Review podcast. Thanks again.
This podcast is produced by Communication Strategies, an award-winning public relations and public affairs firm headquartered in Nashville, Tennessee. Thank you for joining us.
Hello, this is Peter Woolfolk. First, let me say thank you so much for being a listener. Now, I want to alert you to our shiny new podcast website located at podpage.com. However, you can go directly to the podcast site located at publicrelationsreviewpodcast.com. There, you can contact me through email. You can leave a voice message. You can leave a review. You can read an episode blog and frequently learn about the podcast guests. You might also want to suggest podcast topic ideas or even suggest a guest. You can also let me know if you would like to receive our podcast listener logo that you can post on your social media. So I look forward to hearing from you about our new podcast website. Thank you so much for listening to the Public Relations Review Podcast, and have a great day.